So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Jan Jensen, the CMO of Trustpilot. Hi, Jan. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, Adrian. How are you?
I'm very well, sir. Very well. So, Jan, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a bit about you and also a bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm the lucky man to be the CMO at Trustpilot, whose main mission is to connect great companies to their customers and to drive great experiences and engagement through that. And my background is I've lived and worked in many countries and companies. I've always been fascinated with customer centricity and service. And this is a great way for me to be part of that. I've always been fascinated by how that's easy it is to delight customers and how few do so. So I feel like this is a great time and moment where the technology is available to actually drive that much better. And to say just a little bit about Trustpilot, it's an open online review-driven platform, and it builds relationship between consumers and businesses. Right now, we provide close to 90,000 e-commerce businesses with trust scores based on more than 7 million reviews. And we operate in 24 different countries. And really what we do is we make it possible for businesses to engage with their customers directly, and inviting them to provide reviews of their buying experiences. And this, in essence, enables companies to have a better dialogue with their customers and channel feedback to improve business operations and customer service. That's, in essence, what we do. We build trust.
Fantastic. Now, I mean, on that subject of trust, you recently published a series of papers and slideshows on trust, and they called it the Truth About Trust series, and it was about the myths of online reviews, why trust is the only currency of online retailing, and also why a bad review is more valuable than a good review. Now, can you tell me a little bit more about each of these reports in the series and what you found out, and what was the overall aim of the series?
Yeah, I guess, the overall aim was really to demystify online reviews. We did a lot of surveys with prospects and customers and really found out why they're not using it. So we wanted to demystify online reviews. For a consumer, maybe like you and me, a review is a fact of life. For instance, myself, I don't buy or consume anything unless it has some kind of review. For instance, yesterday I went on Airbnb to try to find a place, a property for my vacation, and there was many kind of better properties that I found that had no reviews, so I just, as a consumer, disregard them. And what I look for is really some properties that has good or negative reviews, and look at how actually the owner handles the criticism. Do they do it in a timely fashion, and do they do it in a very open fashion? So that's kind of how I like to see it done. And I think that for many companies, reviews are actually an unknown, so there's a natural fear. And what we wanted to do is address that fear. We wanted to demystify the online reviews, kind of look at what's facts, perception, and then help educate companies.
Do you know, there's a fascinating fact. You know, apparently this is true. I hope it's true. This is one of the things I've learned. There's a list of sort of the top 10 sort of phobias, and apparently our most feared thing is the fear of spiders. But our second most feared thing is a thing called social phobia, and that's basically, it's not the fear of people, but it's the fear of rejection or being disliked. And so I guess that sort of underpins the whole sort of thing about asking for feedback and asking people for what they think about something. I mean, it seems like we're naturally not. I feel like we're not naturally not comfortable with that, because in a way that sort of, I guess it makes us possibly at risk of being wrong.
Yeah, I think when you really, that's super interesting. When you really break down on what is it that you actually fear, and it turns out that there's not too much tangible about it. It's just the baseline. We're afraid of the unknown. So, As I mentioned, that's part of what we try to demystify. It's funny because I was in a webinar a few weeks ago. Actually, it was a week ago in London, and when we asked the question, do they collect reviews, the companies that we had there was about 100 companies online. They all actually said 40% of them did, but only 10% actually showed the reviews. And again, that's going to the fact that what do you do when you get a bad review, and how do you handle it? So I think, and it's interesting because a lot of our research shows that you don't necessarily have to fear that, and there's actually some very positive things about also having negative reviews. But you're right, it's a very deep going thing for human beings, of the deep going trend.
So I think it's interesting. You said something there really interesting, because you said that on the webinar you asked how many people are asking for feedback, and there's about 40 of the 100 companies there. That about 40 said that they were asking for feedback, but only about 10% of them were actually showing it. Now, but the interesting thing is, if you ask most companies, are they surveying their customers? About 90 or 95% of them will actually say yes, we are. So, is it a difference between kind of the question that you're asking and the question around, are you asking for customer feedback?
No, I think the main thing about having an open review platform is that the fact it is open, which means that, and you know this thing about you do a survey and then you look at it and say, that's insightful, let's do something about it. And more or less most companies I've been in will do 10% about it. And the actual accountability and the fact that you make that public is the next step in this. And now what's happened is, of course, that these open review platforms are actually displaying the survey, and you don't have a choice about it. So on that call, it was very clear that they all know the insights they can get from surveys and get from consumers. They all read it, they all gather it, but they're not sure it's a positive thing, and how can they handle if they actually make this available publicly.
Right, I see. I mean, I think there's also another statistic which I've seen quoted where it talks about, well, you talk about 10% will do something with it, but then actually if you only half of those people, or 5% of the total population, will actually go back and report back to their customers what they've done with their feedback and what they're going to do about it in future, which is even more interesting. So it's a bit like, I always think about it in terms of just general human relationships. If somebody asks for your opinion, and you give them your opinion, then you don't do anything with it, or you don't tell them what you've done with it, then you're sort of less likely to give them the benefit of your opinion in the future, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing like you go in and ask for people's opinion and do nothing about it. It's better not to do anything if you don't do anything about it. But the difference here now is, of course, that the question is not if you want to do a survey or not. The question is, the survey is being done through social media. You're being talked about out on social media. And the question is really, what do you want to do about the survey, because it is out.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a really great point. Is that the survey is getting done for you, whether you like it or not. And you might not be conducting it, but it's getting done anyway.
That's right. And what we tend to say then is, well, you can choose to ignore it, which is fine if you don't care about customer service, repeat business, and if you have no competition. But guess what? It's a good time now to start to get your feet wet and kind of structure it and do something about it. And what I think that review systems do, they actually give you a chance to have that open dialogue in a very direct, timely manner where you didn't have that kind of technology before. Right now, you might go out and see you're being talked about on 50 different channels. Now, one thing is monitoring it, but what you do about it, and therefore this cross-section of technology is giving you that opportunity. And of course, it's new because now you're faced with real-time answers. Now you're faced with really having to do something about it. But the smart companies are embracing it, and they're really seeing a huge upside to these direct channels because they're comfortable about the level of service they do, because they react timely, because they kind of actually can build a much better relationship with their customers because they know they're agile enough to do so.
And one of the big things that's hidden in all this, and I think this is the thing that most people fear, is the fear of a bad review, not the fear of getting a good review, because everybody feels good about that when they get a pat on the back. But it's people, if they're doing a good job, is every now and again people have got to accept it. Sometimes things just don't go that well, and accidents happen, mistakes are made, etc. So what have you learned from your research about? You talk about what the last piece in the series is, why a bad review is more valuable than a good one. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that's the case?
Well, it's interesting. I think we go back to human nature there. And, I have a 5-year-old son who naturally just don't believe in things that are perfect. He believes the guy who has some bumps and in his armor, his sleeves are a little bit ripped, is actually the better knight than the one who's in shining light. And I think that, in our findings, we show that you can always expect negative reviews, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, the survey showed that 68%, so more than 2/3 of consumers trust reviews more if they see both negative and positive reviews. So consumers don't believe in perfect. Human beings don't believe in perfect. And that's pretty much why the shampoo ad is out and the online voice is in, because it's very authentic. It's okay, it's okay not to be perfect. And I think that's one of the things that I often tell online businesses and businesses in general. As long as you're open and transparent about it, then it's okay, because you actually disarm it. You build trust. Nothing is as disarming as the sentence, "You are right. I can do better." And I think that we also found in the fact that a negative review doesn't have to remain negative.
Yes.
If your business address the complaint and mitigate it in a timely manner, the customer will likely change their rating, or and they will conduct business with you again. So really, the key stat for me in those papers we did is 95% of customers return if an issue is resolved quickly and efficiently. I mean, you only have to think about yourself. When was the last time that you something bad happened, be it a transaction at a hotel, an airline, and somebody turned around and within 24 hours changed that with a cheek and tongue or something fun and positive, that all of a sudden, hey, that drawn you closer to that company because they did something about it, and they also had a sense of humor about it, and they said, hey, we made a mistake, here's what we'll do.
Absolutely. I think there's also it reminds me of something that I wrote a long time ago, which sort of explains in a neuroscience or psychological sense of why that works. There's a phenomenon called the recovery paradox, which shows that actually when something goes wrong but then it gets fixed, the bounce, as it were, as long as you react in the right sort of way, the benefit of, in terms of loyalty and trust and belief and all those sort of things, is actually you get a much higher return. So almost a customer that somebody who's is a customer, and then something bad happens and it causes them to question whether they should remain a customer. But if you then do well to recover that situation, then you can actually build a greater degree of loyalty and trust with them, because they've actually seen your bad side, but how you've recovered from that, as well as your good side.
That's right, and I find that extremely interesting, and it lies in the core of human being, right? That is the fact that, I'm a married man. I've often, when I'm in the discussions, just turned around and said, and really meaning it, you're absolutely right. Yeah. I can do better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, just by disarming that situation, is quite interesting that what it happens as human beings. And I want to give you also a great example, if I'm allowed. I went some months ago to a hotel in New York, and I ordered room service one evening, and I got a bowl of soup and a beer. It cost me $30, and that's a discussion.
That's an expensive soup.
Exactly, but the soup was kind of half a cup in size, and it was kind of lukewarm. And I kind of called down, and there was somebody there that didn't really notice. Then I reviewed it. And next day, I got free room service, big bowl of warm soup and a bottle of wine. And the thing that made it for me was there was a printout of a funny story on how you should serve soup and what temperature it should have. Since then, I booked in the same hotel now on my trip here to New York, and what it's all about is I smile and have a positive experience about it. It's not so much I got, my money back. It's the fact that they actually had an attitude with some humor, saying, hey, we know now, and now we make fun and say, hey, we're making sure your soup is this temperature, Mr. Jensen. I find that so disarming and encouraging that actually I'm a more repeat customer now than I were before the incident happened.
No, I think that's fair. So we've talked a lot about the negative side of things, but tell me a little bit more about the positive side of things. I mean, let's move away from the fear and let's talk about what's the real upside for firms actually being more transparent, asking for more feedback, and actually displaying some of those results on on their kind of website and other places.
Okay, thanks, Adrian. Yeah, gladly. I mean, first, just to set the scene, I think it's very important just to talk about the trend. I mean, our study and recent studies by, for instance, Nelson have revealed the same trend that over 90% of consumers say that they trust word of mouth and recommendations from friends and family more than any other form of advertising. I think that's super important that the circles of influence are changing.
Right.
And so that means that, in general, companies can no longer rely on just pure advertising. Some of the interesting things that came out of our research was three things, I feel. One, 70% of consumers trust online reviews. To 90%, yeah, that's a big number. And that 90% of consumers have, a buying experience influenced by actually a positive review. And the last stat is 63% of consumers are more likely to buy from you online if it contains customer feedback. And all of this shows us the importance of word of mouth. And that's something that review platforms are very good at delivering.
Wow, that's great. I mean, that's fascinating, and it does show the kind of real sort of upside that exists. So it's not just about managing the mistakes, but it's actually like building it's building the aura of trust that exists and just making it visible for other people to benefit from.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, and a real life example, as maybe one of the last things, is that we have one of our customers, Consumer Mobile in the UK. They're the largest online mobile phone recycler, and they've collected about nearly 100,000 reviews. Not only to analyze how their business is doing service-wise, but actually to demonstrate trust. And if you think about the business model in this, that is that they built a plus 80 million company through reviews. And what they're asking is really, hey, send in your iPhone that's worth £100 and we'll send you a check. I mean, without being able to bridge that trust and show that trust, not from them through ads, but through the consumers having great experiences, they were never able to build that kind of company.
Brilliant. So, Jan, what do you think are the main lessons for businesses coming out of the series and the research that you've done?
Yeah, I think there's many key takeaways. If I just take 3 or 4 key takeaways for me, that is one, I think companies are struggling to get their message across to the consumers. Very crowded, very competitive, many different messages getting thrown at consumers every day. So I think reviews is a great way standing out from the competition. Word of mouth is kind of the new ad, and consumers listen to like-minded consumers before buying, and that's a key takeaway from me. Consumers will reward you if you're open and honest, just like we talked about.
Yeah.
You build trust and outperform competition by showing them how much you care and how you do that. And then again, to the point, handle the right way. Bad reviews are actually really good. And I would say my last thing that we learned is using your trust score, your earned trust score. It's very important this is earned because there's no free lunch here.
Sure.
You can actually get great conversion rates by displaying your trust either online or on your actual cart or shopping experience. Mm-hmm. You can improve up to 58% when you display these on, for instance, your website. So those would be kind of the main things, key takeaways for me.
Okay. I mean, but this phenomenon about sort of online reviews and building sort of trust and being open and transparent with the reviews that you get from your customers. I mean, is this only just for B2C, online, e-commerce, retailing, or do these principles actually apply to all firms, do you think?
I think that, of course, to your point, I would say that it definitely started in B2C and predominantly there. But actually, we see more and more companies using it for managing the overall brand experience through supply chain and vendors. I mean, this is a way for them to make sure they can manage the overall brand experience. For example, we have a large enterprise customer who has over 2,000 office spaces to rent out. And as you think about it, there's the headquarters company, and then there's lots of other companies that actually rent out the space in the actual building.
Right.
Now, from a headquarter point of view, how do you maintain an overall consistent customer experience across all of those? So that's typically, they use our review system for doing that, to make sure that even though, when you aggregate all the different experiences of offline and online, you can actually get a view of it. So really, we're seeing more and more of these setups of how to manage your brand overall.
Okay. And I think the thing that I think about is that I think about how people want to get. Some people might be thinking, yeah, we should do more of that. We should, be asking our customers for feedback. We should be building up those, those reviews and things. But I think there's also another big fear that some firms have, and that is that they don't want to start to go public with this, i.e., to put the little badge on their website that shows their score, etc., etc. Straight away, because it's almost a bit like, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Whereas I don't want to go public until I've got some reviews. But how can I get some reviews to help me go public? If you know what I mean. Yeah.
Sorry, Adrian. What was your question?
So sorry. The question is like if a firm wants to get started with it and they're starting from zero, and actually what they want to do is that they've got to manage the fear of, how do I start from nothing? Or how do I get over that first hurdle? I mean, can they kind of gather reviews before they start publishing kind of them, or they just have to be throw open the doors and just say, right, fine, we need to start collecting reviews. You have to start from somewhere. You have to start from scratch. I mean, what's the best way to get started with this?
I think the best thing a company can do is just start the journey, and I guess. If you have no feeling at all for what's being said about you, to get the early insights into what customers are saying about you, you could use a social media monitoring tool, right, or pure brute desktop research, or just start to get a feel on what's actually being said about you. Of course, you also have to also put down a kind of internally on who will, once these reviews come in, who's going to answer them, how timely do we want to do it. I mean, one thing you don't want to do is start with this kind of technology and then be perceived as kind of a cookie-cutter robot reply to customers that doesn't delight customers, and of course they'll see through it. So you really have to just be open and honest about it. But in regards to reviews that offer a more structured and direct tool to manage it, it's easy to get started. You can get the initial software for free and engage in the conversation the next day. Yeah. It doesn't require much except attention to customer and service you provide. And I guess what I see is, all the good customers or the companies that actually care about customers, they naturally fall into this. But of course, you have to be aware of, you need to set up who answers and how, and really be able to drive customer experiences through the tool, so it's not looks like a fake approach.
Okay. And is there any reason why a company wouldn't do this?
Yeah, if you don't care about your customers,
okay,
you don't have competition, don't start the game. The main thing here is nothing, of course, has changed. Yeah. Trust is still an earned currency. You can't buy it. So you used to, but that game for sure is over. So generally, if you do care about your customers and you do want to do something about your company and excel, then go right ahead. If you don't, then you shouldn't.
Excellent. So, Jan, is there anything else that you think that any other sort of top tips or big lessons that you've learned from working with some of the clients that you work with that you want to pass on to our readers and listeners, like top tips that these are the things that if I want you to take away these 2 or 3 things, this is what they would be?
I mean, again, what I've seen is through ours and our competitive systems. I mean, I see a broad appliances for use of this, all the way from conversions to driving customer service to displaying your trust. So we see a lot of different applications for this, mm-hmm. And I think it's just important to not hide. you're being talked about anyway. You have to kind of embrace this new area of instant feedback. And I think it's a huge opportunity if at your heart you want to do something about it.
Yeah.
You're being talked about so much through social media. The consumers will reward these companies accordingly, and they all understand that we make mistakes. So I really just can say that in the future you won't be able to show ads for your company. It has to be with an endorsement, and if you don't start to engage with the consumers, you will not get that new growth rate. So I think that my best advice is really just to get started, not be fearful, and start to educate yourself on how do I manage complaints and how do I delight my customers, because it's actually a huge opportunity. And the customers we see start with this, see it after they've gotten over the hurdle about the fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, actually, I just thought of something as well. I mean, as an extension, is you could also, if you take very large organizations where the phenomenon of internal service sort of exists because you've got business units that are transacting with each other. I guess you could apply the same principles inside an organization as well as, because you've got internal customers as well as external customers.
Yeah, it's super interesting because one of the things that came up in this webinar was also how they see what the importance from an internal point of view on these review systems. And actually it turned out on that webinar and also throughout our own customer base that internal motivation is actually one that's very much tied to the fact that you have an instant feedback to your work. So think about how it is for a mechanic to be able to show that he actually did something special for a customer, or for a postman, for instance. We deliver services to the Danish post office, and right now they're able to actually track all the way down to the postman what kind of service he delivers and tie it back. And you can imagine how much internal motivation that is, because we can actually now start to track who is really making a difference and attitude and drive it through these systems. So internally, it's a huge area where you can use it as a motivation. It's super interesting.
Fantastic. So, Jan, I come to my final question, and this is the one that I always end these interviews on, and that is this. Is there anything that you would like to shamelessly plug?
That's funny. Shamelessly. Well, I guess you could go to trustpilot.com and try out our product for free. If you like it, tweet me. If you don't and you don't know what to do with it, get in contact. I'd love to follow the journey, but I guess that would be it.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's fascinating and really interesting and really insightful. And I'll make sure I get that all edited up and linked up, and we'll give you a big shout out when it go live. But just want to say thank you for your time today. That's been amazing.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot, Adrian. Thanks.